Hey guys, welcome to SmackTalk RC. This is episode number 20. It is the last episode of season number 2. I hope you guys enjoyed the last episode where I actually brought the gassers to you with the help of Carrie and Alan. This time around, we're going to talk about MCPXs, the all famous E-flite Blade MCPX. I get a lot of requests every day. Every day I get questions. How do you set up your pitch? What kind of brushless setup do you have? What blades do you run? What kind of motor is it? You know, it's just it's so much easier just to put it all on tape. So I decided to spend the next 45 minutes talking to you about the Blade MCPX. And as with any other SmackTalk RC episode, I have to start from the very beginning. So I'm going to start by opening the box, showing you what's in the box. Then we're going to take the thing out. We're going to fly it in stock form really quick, show you a few tips and tricks, and a few things that I usually do to make it fly better. I see a lot of people making mistakes with the setup, even though it's a really simple setup and there's nothing to it. I see a lot of people just setting it up wrong, especially when it comes to the collective. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to get into upgrades, types of blades, motors. We're going to talk about conversions for brushless. We're going to talk about how to charge your batteries. What kinds of batteries are there? Which ones do I prefer? Which ones I know work and don't work as well? Just all kinds of tips. It's just going to be a pretty interesting episode about the MCPX. So that being said, let's get it rolling. Alright guys, here we have the MCPX box. This is how it comes. Very, very cool helicopter. This is the bind and fly version, and as you can see, this box is even sealed. Thanks to Horizon for sending this over to me. There's two versions. There's the bind and fly version, which is what I have here, and there's the ready to fly version that comes with a transmitter as well. The bind and fly version, which is this one right here, is meant to be used with your own transmitter. And I personally recommend using at least a 5-channel radio. The DX5 would be suitable. However, if this is your first helicopter and you are going to purchase a transmitter, I highly, highly encourage you to at least go to a 6-channel, if not a 7-channel radio. Because when you end up buying a larger model, like a 50 size or even a 500 size or even a 90 size, you're going to need that 5th channel for your gyro gain, and possibly, the 6th channel for the gyro gain, and possibly even a 7th channel for governor gain and so forth. So here are the contents of the box. You get your manual, you get an extra set of blades, and we're going to talk about blades a little later in the episode. Set of bulleted blades, bullet blades I call them. They basically have some extra weight at the leading edge that gives it some stability. You get some extra little grommets and extra little links and some hardware. You get some screwdrivers that you can use for replacing blades and making small repairs. And you get, of course, your manual here. Then as we open the box, so you can see here, you have your actual MCPX, and again, this box is still sealed. That's the actual MCPX, and it's all built, ready to fly. And it comes with the regular blades that don't have the bullets in them. And finally, we get 2 batteries. These are the E-flite batteries. These batteries are actually pretty good. They do the job. They work well. They're 200 milliamps. They're just a single cell. And these are 25C lithium polymer single cell packs. You get your charger. And you get the plug for the charger for the wall. There's obviously other ways to charge these helicopters. I'm going to give you some pointers towards how you can what you can do to get multiple batteries charged at the same time. It also comes with this little adapter, and for all of you that are familiar with the other E-flite helicopters that use the smaller connectors, such as the the MSR and the E-flite MCX, they use a smaller connector. So these guys at Horizon, what they did is they made a adapter for that connector so that you could actually charge. You can use this charger to charge your smaller connector batteries, for example, the ones again for the MSR, and you can also use it to charge these batteries. Charge time with this charger actually varies. It depends on the rate that you're charging at, but you can select the rate from 0.1 to 0.7 amps, and basically 0.7 amps is what, if you do the math, is about 3.5C or something like that. So based on that, it should take about, I don't know, a little less than 20 minutes. If you do the 0.1, that's half of 1C, and that should take 2 hours. If you do 0.2, that should take about an hour. Keep in mind that with any lithium polymer battery, the same rules apply. The faster you charge the battery, the shorter the lifespan of the battery. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay guys, I have my Spectrum DX7S here. We're going to use this ready to set up the MCP. Like I stated before, it's always preferable if you have a radio that's capable of at least 6 channels or more, just thinking about the future, but you can get away with 5 channels to set up the MCP. So the first thing you do is you power on the radio on the system menu, and I already selected a model here that I have available, which is model 20. As you can see, it says heli, there's nothing in it. So we're going to go to that one, and then I'm just basically going to go over all these options. Model type is helicopter, of course, and model name, I'm just going to give it, just so I don't spend much time here, I'm just going to call it new MCP. So I don't get it all confused. New MCP. Then next screen, swatch type, we're going to leave it at 1 servo because that's exactly what we need. Switch select, I'm going to leave that alone. Flight mode, well, this is very important. Make sure that you have a flight mode set up. As you can see, it's set to the flight mode switch. And then for hold, you definitely have to have a hold. This is very, very important because when you start setting it up, especially when you want to set up your pitch, your collective travel, you have to be able to like hit the throttle hold as you check the blades, because you won't be able to easily unplug the motor on this thing. So I'm going to set it to the rudder, the RUD-DR switch, because that's what I prefer. That's personal preference. And then we're not going to reset anything. We don't need any of this other stuff. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to power the transmitter off again. And then we're going to plug the MCP in. And as soon as we plug it in, you're going to see that the LED starts blinking. One thing you got to keep in mind, every time you're going to fly this little helicopter, you have to power on your transmitter first, because if you plug in the actual helicopter first, it doesn't sense or it doesn't see a transmitter signal being received or sent, it will automatically enter bind mode. So after you're done binding it, make sure that every time you go fly, you power on the transmitter first. So we plug in the MCP and the LED will start blinking, and as soon as it starts blinking, we're going to go ahead and bind the model. So okay, and then you hold the bind switch while you power it on, and it's going to say binding 10:24:22 milliseconds, and the MCP will go live. At this point you have to be careful, because if you apply throttle, the MCP is going to want to spool up. So you definitely don't want to do that. The first thing you want to do is you want to test that your you want to make sure that your throttle hold is working. So you go to throttle hold, hit the throttle hold switch, and try to give it some throttle, and it's not going anywhere, so we're good. So we're in throttle hold. So we go to the normal menu here, and the first thing you want to do is just look at your travel adjustment for your aileron and elevator. Most people are happy with 100% in both directions. I personally fly this thing at 140%, which is like almost the most that I can get out of it. And that's just because of my flying style, and because it sort of the helicopter feels a little bit slow off center to me, actually slow all the way around out of the box at 100%. But that's of course for 3D flight and so forth. If you're not going to do 3D, if you're just going to hover around and fly around, 100% will be enough. So double check that. Same with your rudder rate. I fly mine maxed out because I want a little bit faster pirouette. Although the pirouette speed doesn't really change a whole lot. It's very negligible, but I still max it out. Again, for hovering and normal flying, you can leave it at 100. So that's all good. The next thing we're gonna come back here to adjust the pitch. I'm gonna give you some pointers on that. We're just gonna browse through all these screens. Make sure you set up your expo. I personally run 0 expo on these. You know, some people run some expo to slow it down a little bit. Again, personal preference. And then you don't need a throttle curve. First thing I do is I go to idle up 1. This radio only has 1 idle up, so I just go to my idle up and I'm going to bump it all the way up to 100. And you need to make sure that you have 100 flat curves on your idle up if you're going to do 3D. You definitely don't want a V curve on this thing. It doesn't have that much power. It doesn't need a V curve. I've seen people use V curves on these. Don't do it. Just set it 100% flat. I leave my normal throttle curve stock, which is 0, 25, 50, 75, 100. I don't mess with that. And then my hold, which is the offset for hold, I leave alone. I don't change my pitch curve. There's no reason to. You really don't want to mess with that. I'll explain to you how you want to adjust your pitch. There's nothing in the gyro. There's nothing in the governor. There's no tail curve. We don't need any mixing. And you know, if you want to set up a timer, I'll set it for about 3 minutes because it's about all I can get when I do 3D. I'll set it at about like 3 minutes and set it throttle out so it activates at 50%. And that's it. Once you're done with this, then the next and final step is to make sure that you actually have the right amount of collective. This is kind of tricky, and what I suggest you do is you actually fold the blades on the helicopter. And again, make sure that you're on throttle hold. Definitely need to be on throttle hold for this one. So you fold the blades on the helicopter, and they won't actually fold all the way, but they'll fold enough to give you a decent idea as to how much pitch you have. And then once the blades are folded, you go back to your transmitter, you go to your endpoints again. This time you go for travel on the pitch, and then you go to full negative stick and you check the pitch on your blades, and then you go to full positive pitch and you check the pitch on your blades. I see a lot more positive than negative, so I'm gonna reduce this 100 to about like probably about 70. And that seems pretty equal just by eyeballing it. Now, one thing that I see a lot of people do that's a huge mistake when they're setting up their MCPs is they set it up with a lot of collective, a lot of pitch. And when I get these complaints about people saying that their tail is not holding and everything else, well, the tail's not going to hold if you overpower the whole system. If you have way too much pitch and you get carried away just applying full positive or negative, you're going to rob so much power out of the motor that the tail's just not going to hold. That's all there is to it. So when you set these up, and I'm going to show you here in a little bit at the field, when you set them up, you want it actually to be a very, very slow climber. You don't want a lot of power. You can't, it just doesn't have the power to have a lot of collective. So you want very, very little collective. Basically, you want it so that when you punch full collective, it barely climbs. Because otherwise, when you get carried away, if you bury the collective, the tail's just going to give out, and you're going to load it, and it's just going to crash. So that's how I recommend setting up the collective at first. But then I'm going to give you some tips when we get to the field on how to actually fine-tune the collective. And again, don't be afraid, don't be concerned if you see that these numbers here for endpoints and pitch travel are different. I've had them as different. I've had some that are like 40 on one side and 90 on the other side. They're not going to be the same. There's just no way they are. going to be the same. And don't worry about it. As long as the helicopter has the same amount of positive and negative, the numbers here don't really matter at all. So we're going to go ahead and head out to the field and continue on. Okay, we're here at the field. Unfortunately, I couldn't find an indoor facility to fly this, but the field works. It's not too windy today. This thing can handle probably about 10 to 15 mile-an-hour winds. It's very difficult to fly with high winds, but it still can handle it as opposed to its counterparts, the fixed pitch helicopter like an MSR. This guy can't fly in the wind. I recommend a calm day, of course. One thing you need to keep in mind, I've seen people run the blades really tight. Look at how loose they are. That's how you want them. You want the blade to be able to lead and lag when you're flying it. So I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. And as I showed you before when I was setting up the radio, I kind of eyeballed the pitch, positive, negative, and I ended up with about 100 on the negative side and 70 on the positive side to have the same amount of pitch, positive, negative. Now, again, that was just eyeballing it. So I'm going to do a couple of quick tests, and I'm going to show you what I'm doing to kind of try to get the pitch as equal as possible on the positive and negative side. This, believe it or not, is the very first flight on this MCPX. Here we go. Seems like it's gonna fly now. Perfect. All right, that's 100%. I'm in idle up right now. I'm gonna check my pitch. I'm gonna do a full collective climb with positive pitch. All right, that's a little bit too much pitch. I'm gonna flip it upside down. And I'm gonna do a full negative climb with full negative pitch. Whoa, see? Tail pirouette it. That means I have way too much negative. So whatever I did at home and eyeballed it did not actually work very well. So you can see there's a little bit of shake on the helicopter, and I'm gonna talk about that here briefly as well. But I'm gonna drop my negative all the way down. I'm down at 80 and 70. And this is basically what you kind of have to do when you're at home. Just eyeball it, because you really can't do a whole lot. There's really no pitch gauge. So let's repeat the same operation here. I'm gonna flip it, try to stabilize it, and I'm gonna go ahead, it's windy right now as you can see, I'm gonna go ahead and apply full negative and see what happens. Let's just wait for this wind gust to go away a little bit. All right, I'm gonna apply full negative. Much better. So I think we have pretty equal amounts. Positive. A little bit more negative, so we're gonna fix that real quick, and then we'll be all set. So I'm gonna go back on my radio, and I'm gonna go back to my travel adjustments, drop my pitch on the negative to 75. So I actually ended up almost the same, 75 and 70. And I tell you what, I'm gonna drop it 5 points on both now. I'm in throttle hold, so I can actually go all the way up. So I'm actually at 70 and 65. The goal here, the reason why I'm dropping both is because I want the least amount of pitch possible. So I'm gonna run the least amount of collective pitch I can. So here we go again. Now let's try it one more time. Positive, very sluggish. That's actually what you want, believe it or not. And then negative, very sluggish. And that's really all that you need to do. The key here is that you need to make sure that you're not over pitching your helicopter. These things don't actually have, like I said before, enough power to be able to run a lot of pitch. Now, when you get into the brushless setup, which we're gonna talk about, of course, then yes, you can run a lot more pitch and get away with it. But when the helicopter is stock, as you can see, this is 100% stock, and it can still do 3D. It's kind of sluggish, but it can do it. Now, I have a couple of comments about the stock setup. I have had people ask me if that video that I posted for the first time on YouTube, if that was like a special, like hot rodded, like MCP. No, it wasn't. That was all stock like this one. However, I can tell you one thing, there's huge differences between one and the other, between several different models of the exact same models, because since these are brush motors, some brush motors have more power than others. And that's just completely normal. That's just the nature of brush power. So if you're really, really picky when it comes to the amount of power you're getting out of your MCPX, and you don't want to go with the brushless setup, you can just buy several different brush motors for it. I know this is kind of redundant and kind of stupid, but if you spend a little bit of money and buy 3, 4, 5 motors and you start swapping them, I guarantee you, you're going to come across a motor that has a lot more power than the others. And again, that's just the nature of brush setups. So as you can see, this thing can do 3D. Again, it's not a powerhouse, and I'm right at minute 3 right now, so my battery's going to start dying here soon. But it still can do 3D. Let's talk about a couple more things before I close the segment, if I can land it. Here we go. So stock setup, as you saw it, it works well. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not a powerhouse. You need a lot of collective management. The best thing you can do is run the least amount of pitch, the least amount of positive and negative, so you can get away with making hard collective inputs without crashing it. And of course, if your collective management is great, you can get away with anything. But even for me, I feel that if I have too much collective, I can at any time just get carried away and over pitch it, and then, you know, my tail starts pirouetting and just goes out of control. But great little machine for a stock machine. Now we're gonna start talking about the different kinds of upgrades that you can do to these guys. Okay guys, let's talk a little bit about the different kinds of upgrades that you can do to your MCPX. The first upgrade I want to talk about before we get into the brushless kind of stuff is a popular upgrade that a lot of people started doing before they went into brushless. And basically what they were doing is they were just extending the boom. So as you can see, this is the stock boom right here. This is what comes with your MCPX. What a lot of people were doing basically is they were just going to a hobby shop and buying a piece of carbon rod, and they were basically extending the boom and basically coming up with this right here. And as you can see, it's quite a bit longer. It's kind of hard to tell here what the differences are on this one, but I'm guessing it's probably about 20 millimeters longer. And you know, you don't have to be exact. It's not like you have to measure it and make it 17 millimeters longer or anything like that. Just make it longer a little bit, you know, anywhere between 20 to 25 millimeters up to an inch or so should be plenty. And basically that achieves two different things. The first thing is it gives you a better pivoting, I guess you could say, how do you call it, pivoting point. So the tail becomes more precise, it holds better, and also because the carbon rod that you're going to buy is not hollow, it's going to make the whole tail boom stronger, so it's going to handle a lot more crashes before you actually have to replace it. So it serves two purposes. I've flown this with the brush setup quite a bit, and it does make the tail feel better. It gives it a more positive feel, better response. The tail doesn't just freak out and give out as often as it does with the stock tail boom. So that's just basically it. All you do is you just change your tail fin to the other boom, you swap your motor to the other boom, and you just plug your connector back into the main board, just like you did with your original boom, and that's it. Aside from that, the other mod that I know people do with the brush setup is once they extend the boom, they take the blades just like these, and they cut them out. Just like these. These are all beat up, but it doesn't matter. I'm just trying to show you for reference purposes. Basically, as you can see here, if you compare these two blades, these blades are cut a little bit. So what that does is that removes, actually that lightens the load on the head and makes the head spin freer. It reduces some of the lift, but it actually makes the helicopter feel a little bit better. I really don't think this does a whole lot, to be honest with you. This has a similar effect to simply running less collective, I guess. But you know, a lot of people just make comments about this working out really well. And basically, if you look at it, it's just sort of it's like a taper cut. So basically, take like a pair of scissors and just cut the blades like with a tapered shape, and that's it. So that's about it for upgrades for brush setup. That's what everybody out there is doing. So let's go ahead and move on and talk about the other kinds of upgrades. All right, guys, we're going to talk a little bit about brushless conversions here. The first thing you got to do before you go brushless is you have to buy basically 3 different items. You have to buy a motor. And I'm going to talk about these here in a minute. You need to buy a motor. You need to buy a speed controller, something that looks like this. Fortunately, it's mounted on the helicopter. And then, of course, you need to buy a brush to brushless converter. The most popular options nowadays for motors are these 2 motors right here. This motor is the Helimax motor. I believe it's an 11,000 kV motor. It's available from Tower Hobbies. It provides pretty decent power. It's not a powerhouse, but it's certainly far more powerful than your brush setup. This other motor right here is available from Wow Hobbies. This has got a little bit more power. I'm not 100% sure as to what the kV rating is, but it's definitely more powerful. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny little outrunner. This is what I personally run, and although I've run them both, I can definitely tell the difference. It's not a huge difference, but it's definitely somewhat noticeable. Tiny little outrunner motor is pretty cool. And at the end of the episode, I'm going to post URLs and links to where you can buy these things. So basically, you have to decide on a motor, either the Helimax or the outrunner. And once you make that decision, then you have to get a brush to brushless converter. There's a couple of companies that you can buy brush to brushless converters from. The first one is Extreme Production, and they make this little brush to brushless converter you see on this board right here. The other option is the Steve brush to brushless converter. Again, I'm going to post URLs to where you can get these. But basically, that takes care of your brush to brushless converter. And then finally, you need a speed controller. And the most popular speed controller is this guy right here. It's also Helimax. And it's made by the same guys that make this little in-runner motor. It's available from Tower Hobbies as well. So to recap, you need a motor. Whether you go with in-runner or outrunner, you can get the Helimax motor, or you can get the outrunner motor from Wow Hobbies. Then you need a brush to brushless converter, which again, you can go with the Extreme Production one, or you can go with the Steve one. I don't have any experience with the Steve one. I have experience with the Extreme Power Production one, and it works really, really well. And then you need a speed controller, and again, the most popular one is the Helimax speed controller. I believe you can buy the speed controller from Helimax and the in-runner all as one package, or you can buy them separately. So if you want to go with the in-runner setup, you might be better off just buying the in-runner and the speed controller all at the same time. Or if you want to use the outrunner motor, you can just go to Wow Hobbies, buy this, and then go to Tower Hobbies and buy the speed controller. And basically how this works is you just basically solder your brush to brushless converter to your board, to the same spot where you would actually plug in your motor. And then what you do is you just run it to your speed controller, and then from your speed controller you go to your motor. And then your power feed comes from your speed controller at this point. Now this is all cool. You can do it, start soldering stuff, work with tiny little bitty teeny little wires and stuff like that if you don't want to mess with any of this stuff. Another really good option is you go to Wow Hobbies and you can buy a complete kit. And that kit is right here. It gives you everything you need to convert your MCPX to brushless power. And you basically get the outrunner motor, which I just showed you. You get a brush to brushless converter with a speed controller already built in, sort of. It's really not built in, it's a couple of boards together, but it kind of is. It's one unit pretty much. And you get the extended tail boom with the bigger motor. And I'm going to talk about extended tail booms as well here real quick with the motor upgrade. So you get all this, which is everything you need to make the conversion to brushless for $135 or so from Wow Hobbies. One really cool thing about this is the fact that you don't have to do hardly any soldering. Everything's kind of done for you. You get all the connectors and everything, so it's just basically a plug and play upgrade. It's the easiest, and it comes with the instructions on how to plug everything in. So you can see here, you plug the motor to the converter, and then you feed the battery power through there, and then you connect the MCPX to it. So it's, I mean, you can cut some of these wires and solder together. to minimize waste, to get rid of some of these redundant connectors and stuff, but you really don't have to if you don't want to. So when I eventually do this conversion here in the next couple of segments, I'm probably going to go ahead and solder this just to lighten the weight of the helicopter. But again, it's not necessary. In fact, I don't even know if I'll end up doing it. Now, this is a 13,600 kV motor. I just found that out. So anyway, what I was going to talk to you about is when you buy that conversion, you get the longer boom with the bigger motor. And this is another thing that you have to do when you go to brushless power. When you go to brushless power, you definitely cannot get away with running the stock tail motor. It's just not going to cut it. And I know that there's people out there working on brushless tail motors, but this is so far the proven solution for upgrading your tail when you upgrade to brushless power. This is a 120 SR tail motor with a little bit longer tail blades. I believe these are tail blades from a Wakera 43B or 4, just small Wakera. And it comes on that kit for $135, and it includes the bigger tail motor. So if you are doing the upgrade to brushless by buying the parts all separately, again, you're going to have to buy a motor, you're going to have to buy a speed controller, a brush to brushless converter, then you're going to have to buy the carbon fiber rod to make the longer tail boom, you're going to have to buy the 120 SR tail motor and the tail blades. So you can do it separately, of course. You can save $20, $30 or so, or you can buy this kit from Wow Hobbies that comes with everything and it's all plug and play. Again, it's very important that you upgrade your tail motor and you put this 120 SR motor in there, because otherwise you're going to have so much power on the rotor head that you're going to override the power of the tail, and your stock tail is just not going to cut it. Simple. You can also use the 120 SR tail blades, but they need to be cut down a little bit if you don't want to use these Wakera tail blades. Go back and take a look at some of these blades. I showed you these in the beginning when we were opening the box. These are the stock blades that come with the MCPX. And then you have the bullet ones, like I call them, bullet blades or whatever, that, you know, have this little bullet looking thing that adds weight to the leading edge for stability. Then you have blades made by KBDD, the company that makes, if you're familiar with them, they make the popular colorful tail blades for your larger helicopters like 50 size or whatever. And then finally we have some carbon fiber blades. These ones are made by a company called Micro Heli. Pretty cool looking blades. They're made out of carbon fiber. So basically, which blade is the best blade for you? Well, I don't know. It really depends on your personal preference. I have very little experience with the carbon fiber ones, although I'm actually a firm believer that this thing does not need carbon fiber blades. I think this thing can benefit a lot from having extra dampening. As you saw before when we were flying the stock version of this thing, it was shaking a little bit, and I told you that I would touch up on vibrations later, and I'm going to discuss that on a segment called maintenance. But that vibration at times could be attributed to the lack of dampening or a bent spindle and so forth. And I think that the less flexible the blade is, the more prone the helicopter will be and susceptible to vibrations, and it just won't be flying as good. Next ones here are again, I don't want to put these down. If you guys like carbon fiber, go for it. They're really cool looking, and they're, again, carbon fiber. So you got to kind of try them out and draw your own conclusions when it comes to how they perform. Next ones, again, the KBDD. They're very popular. A lot of people are running them. Then we have the stock blades, which are a little bit too squirrely. I actually don't really care for them a whole lot. They make the helicopter just, I don't know, just way too touchy, too squirrely. And finally, we have the stock bullet blades. These are my favorite blades, honestly. But again, it depends on flying style. It depends on what you're going to be doing, how you're going to be flying it, you know, the batteries you're running, the overall power you're getting, whether you're going with in-runner or out-runner or stock or brush or brushless. But to me, with the brushless setup, these are my favorite blades because they increase the stability of the helicopter, but it still don't load the motor at all. So for Heart 3D and stuff like that, for some reason, I tend to prefer these. But they're all great, so you could just take your pick. All right, guys, we're going to talk here now about batteries and charging, as well as charging equipment. As I explained earlier, here's the stock battery that comes with your MCPX. This is a 25C, one cell, of course, 200 milliamp battery. It works well. There's nothing wrong with it. I fly it quite a bit. There's no issues with it. But if you want more capacity and a little bit more power, this is a 35C 300 milliamp from Nanotech. This is available from the guys out in China. I believe it's called Hobby King, hobbyking.com. These things are very inexpensive. I find them more powerful than the stock batteries, not only because they have the higher C rating, but because they have higher capacity. And this is my favorite battery. I fly these a lot. Finally, you have a battery made by Hyperion, and it's a 320 milliamp 25C battery. The only thing about this battery that I personally don't like is that it has a micro mini or micro Dean's connector. Micro, I believe it's called. So that means that you have to resolder your board, your MCPX, to accept this type of connector. I personally don't like it, don't use it just because of that reason. It's just a little big and clumsy. It's just not as compact and as light as the other batteries. It doesn't fit in the stock battery tray for the MCPX, so you have to go ahead and buy a different little support mount for it that you can also find, I believe, at Wow Hobbies. That allows this battery to fit perfectly, in the standard battery mount. It looks like a little rubber thingy that mounts onto the landing gear, so you can install this. So you can use it. I hear good comments about them because of the bigger connector. There's less resistance, yada yada. I don't think it's necessary. So these are the three most popular batteries you can get for the MCPX. Now, let's move on to chargers. You have, of course, your normal charger, which is what everybody uses. Great charger, but to be honest with you, it's a pain in the butt, just simply because you'd have to own like 10 of these things to be able to fly for like an hour. I mean, it sucks to have to wait 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes even longer, to be able to fly again. So what I recommend doing, what I've been doing myself, is I got me this little board. It's made by Hyperion, and it has 6 ports in it, and it has banana plugs at the end. So all you do is you take your standard radio, your standard charger, just any charger basically, plug it in, and then charge the batteries as if you were charging a 1S battery pack, a big 1S. Because the little batteries don't fit into these connectors, because these connectors were designed for the smaller batteries, the smaller connectors that were made for the MSR and the MCX. What you do is you buy some of these cables right here, which are the same cables that come with your stock charger, that convert the adapt from the small connector to the bigger connector. You just plug them in here, and obviously you would need 6 of them. And then you just plug a bunch of batteries in here, and then you can charge them all at the same time. So if you're charging 6 batteries at the same time, be careful here. You have to do your math. If you have 6 batteries, number one, make sure that all the batteries are the same capacity. You don't really want to be mixing and matching. I really wouldn't want to be charging 3 of these and 3 of these, because these are 300 milliamps, these are 200 milliamps. So when you charge in parallel, you definitely don't want to do that. But you can charge 6 of these, or you can charge 6 of these. Just do the math. If you're charging 6 300 milliamp batteries, that's 300 times 6 is 1800. So theoretically 1.8 amps of charge is 1C. That's what I recommend. I don't recommend exceeding 1C when charging all these together. Still, 1C is 1 hour, and in 1 hour you're going to have 6 batteries ready to fly. So this is a really cool solution for charging. So we're going to go ahead and move on now. All right, let's talk about bling. There's a lot of things you can buy. There's 2 main companies that make upgrades, and I'm talking about metal upgrades. I'm talking about swashplate blade grips and so forth. One of them is called RKH, Raconhelli. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. They make all kinds of stuff. As you can see, there's blade grips here. There's head blocks, and there's swash blades as well for it. We're going to talk about other stuff like frames here in a minute. But these guys make these upgrades. Do they help? It's debatable. I don't know. Some of these heads, for example, if you look, I don't know if I can get it close enough into the camera, but if you look at this head block, it captures the links, the pitch links. So by capturing the pitch links, when you crash, they don't come off the helicopter. So that's a good thing. But then on the other hand, it kind of tends to bend the links over time from crashes. As you can see, that link is actually pretty bent. But anyway, they make blade grips, and they make swatch plates, and they make head blocks, and they make all kinds of stuff. I don't particularly have anything that's made by Micro Heli here. I know they make really, really good stuff as well. So consider Micro Heli as another option for upgrades for blade grips and head blocks and swatch plates and all that kind of stuff. Micro Heli also makes a frame set that is made out of carbon fiber, and I don't have one here either. But RKH, the same company, Raycon Heli, makes one too, and that's what you see here. And they even give you little boom supports and stuff like that. You know, does that do anything for you? Not really. It just adds just bling to the helicopter. It turns the MCPX into a completely different helicopter, because at this point you have a different longer boom, you have boom supports, you have a different frame set that is made out of carbon fiber, you have a swatch plate that is metal, you have a head block, blade grips. Like, it's just basically a different helicopter. They even make landing gear for this thing that is made out of carbon fiber, which, by the way, I tried and it looked really cool, but after about 3 crashes I had to throw it away because it wasn't as durable as the stock landing gear. And these frames also are not as durable as the stock plastic frames. In fact, I've crashed several times and I broke these frames right about here, right in the area where the boom connects to the actual frame itself. Nonetheless, they're really cool. They look really, really sweet. Is it something you need? I don't think so, but it's something that is definitely cool to have. So I think that covers it for bling and upgrades of that sort. Okay guys, I'm going to actually do a conversion now, and I'm going to go with the conversion that I just showed you earlier from Wild Hobbies. Conversion's right here. It pretty much is pretty clear instructions as to how to get it done. The one thing that they don't tell you here that you have to do, and I'm going to go over that here real quick, is the fact that you have to cut your frames. So you have to take both of your front servos, left and right servos, and then you have to remove your main board. And then after you do that, you have to pull your main gear, your landing gear, and your main gear, and then you have to cut your frames, as you can see here. Basically, the whole bottom part of the frames is cut to allow the motor to fit. Otherwise, it just won't fit. This is an old set of frames that I had that has been crashed many times. Kind of showing you here. But basically, this is going to take probably about 30 minutes, I'm thinking. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start sort of a time lapse. I'm going to speed all this thing up and get it done. Kind of so you get an idea as to, you probably won't be able to see a whole lot once I speed this video up, but at least you kind of get a rough idea as to how long it takes. And again, everything is in the instructions, so it's really, really easy. I'm not gonna solder. I said I would, but I changed my mind. I feel kind of lazy today. I'm just gonna do the plug and play method and just get it done. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start this thing and start the time lapse. actually done with this thing right now, and as you saw, it's actually quite easy to do. It took about 30 minutes. I took my time. The majority of the time was spent cutting the frames down. That was a pain in the butt because my razor X-Acto knife here is pretty dull. It doesn't work. But anyway, it's done. The only complaint that I have, this is actually the first time I do this one. The only complaint that I have is all the wires. There's just like a lot of wires, but that's because I'm not soldering. I mean, if you take your time and solder all these wires, you can make them shorter and you can just make it a lot better. I wanted to get this thing done as quickly as possible, so I just didn't solder anything. So I'm gonna have to go back here and just double check my wires and make sure they're out of the way, they're not rubbing up against the motor and stuff like that. But as you can see, it's a pretty simple upgrade. It's plug and play. Everything's literally plug and play. No soldering required. Plug the motor, the tail motor, in the same spot where you plug the original tail motor. I mean, other than that, there's really nothing to it. All I need now is just to plug this thing in and make sure it's working, put the plates in, and go fly. So we're gonna head out to the field and fly a bunch of these little MCPXs with brushless conversions, and kind of give you an overview of the power that you get with brushless, and some tips on how to set up any setup differences between brush and brushless, flight times, and all that kind of stuff. All right, we're here at the field and we're gonna go ahead and fly these things. We're very, very actually lucky that there's not even a drop of wind today, which is extremely unusual for South Florida. We normally get 50-mile-an-hour winds on a daily basis. So today is one of those 3 days a year, maybe 4, that we actually have no wind, so it's perfect. So anyway, this is the one we just converted. It's absolutely 100% stock. However, it has, of course, the brushless conversion from Wow Hobbies. Other than that, it doesn't have anything special. I have the Nanotech battery that I showed you guys earlier. I have the plates with the bullet weights on the leading edge, and that's it. After we fly this, we're gonna go ahead and fly my super MCPX that has every single bling that you can imagine. It also has the bullet blades, but this guy has the RKH frames and the swash plate and the hub and the blade grips and like everything you can imagine. Like, I don't think you can get more upgrades. I guess you could get the boom supports for it. But we're gonna do a comparison between the two, and you guys will see that they really fly the same. In fact, this one ends up being heavier than this one. One thing that is important about brushless MCPXs is the fact that a lot of the times, because of the longer boom and the heavier motor in the tail, they just tend to be tail heavy. This boom, the one that comes with the Wow Hobbies kit, is not as long as the boom that I have on my other helicopter, if you can see. So it doesn't affect the CG as much. On this guy, it's pretty tail heavy. It has a little bit better tail. When it was new, not so anymore because the brush motor in the tail is kind of worn out a little bit, but it does work better just because it's got a longer boom, but it's more tail heavy. So I've seen people put like lead weight in the nose, but guys, you know, these things are very, very, very heavy as they are, considering their size. You know, we're talking 40-something grams for one of these guys when they should be more in the mid-30s or low 30s. So they are heavy, and with that being said, you need to do as much possible to minimize the weight. Other than that, you know, if you can't get away with not adding any weight, if you can live with a little bit of tail heaviness, do it, because it's much better that way. If not, you can add a little bit of weight to the nose, but I really wouldn't go there. So we're gonna go ahead and fly this guy right now. I ended up, as I was explaining to you earlier, when we worked on the initial setup for the Brush helicopter, and I was showing you the radio setup, I told you that I run 140 on my endpoints for aileron and elevator. Well, on this helicopter, I just tried it. I just did a quick test flight with it, and it was extremely fast, almost out of control. So I ended up dropping my endpoint adjustments for aileron and elevator to about 120, and I did add some expo. I have 15% expo to deaden the center feel. Again, it's up to you. It's personal preference. I recommend that you start with 100% on your endpoints and you work your way up if you want a faster feel. So let's go ahead and fly this guy. Again, this is 100% stock. It has the Wow Hobbies conversion, and it has the bullet blades. So you can hear this. I don't know if you can hear it. It's got a bat vibration. Sometimes they'll do that. It'll go away here in a second. Usually the vibration happens at like half stick, you know, or around a hover or around like 0 pitch, and that's happening simply because there's a lot of head speed. The servos are not very precise. I'm gonna give you some tips and tricks on how to improve that, how to make it better. As you can see, the power is just dramatically, like it's just drastically higher than the power you get out of a brush setup. A little bit of wind now, but nonetheless, like you can tell, it's just the power is just a lot more than with the stock setup. I mean, it just really makes the helicopter enjoyable to fly. Now, another thing that you got to keep in mind is when you set it up, please make sure that you don't overdrive the pitch also. You can get away with more pitch on these guys because you have more power, so you can run more collective than you could run it before. But you still don't want to run like so much collective that you end up like overloading it, because you will overload the head and you will override the power as well. And in part this is because the helicopter is somewhat heavy, so it loads. If I don't manage my collective, you can hear the motor kind of dying down a little bit. I remember, you know, if anybody would have told me that something like this would exist 5 years ago, I would have told them that they were crazy. There was no way in the world that anybody could have ever imagined that there was going to be such a small collective pitch helicopter ever made. But again, as you can see, the performance is just ridiculous. A lot of fun to fly. One thing I recommend is check your timers, guys, because with the brush setup, you can get away with, you know, flying this thing until the battery's dead. With the brushless setup, you really can't. What happens with the brushless setup is when it goes to cut off, it just cuts off and it's over. There's no warning. It's just going to quit on you. That was kind of close. Yeah, these things are super cool. So I set my timer at like 3 minutes, and 3 minutes is just what I'm comfortable with flying this thing before the battery cuts off. I've got it nailed down to where like another 10 seconds and the battery cuts off. That's my timer starting. If I keep on flying within the next 20 seconds, the helicopter's just gonna cut off and die and crash. So, there we go. So that was the flight with the stock, I guess, stock you could say, yet brushless kit from Wow Hobbies. It's got a lot of power, without a doubt. This battery is actually pretty warm. If I would have flown the stock MCPX E-flite batteries, you actually would have noticed that the power would have been less. Not a considerable difference, but it's definitely very noticeable. So now we're gonna fly this guy. This guy's beat up. It's got a lot of flights on it, a lot of flights, and it doesn't really have as much power. This one has the speed controller from the Nova CP, the same Helimax speed controller, and I'm not 100% sure, don't quote me on it, but it might not have the same amount of power because of the speed controller, because it's the same motor. Now this one has a little bit better tail just because it's got a little bit longer boom, but the difference is really negligible. On this one, for some reason, my endpoints are at 140. It's like I need higher endpoints on this one for it to fly as good as the other one, as fast as the other one. Oh, we have a little gust of wind. Clearly you can see it's not as powerful. I mean, it's still far better than stock. So this is proof that the metal blade grips and the carbon fiber frame and all that kind of stuff is just really not helping. It just really doesn't do anything for you. It looks really cool. Looks really, really cool. But other than looks, that's about all you get. You get looks and a little weight. This one's got a canopy from Horizon that never made it to production. It's a silver color. I don't know why they never released it, but it's actually a pretty cool color. Now again, on this one, my endpoints are a little higher. I'm maxed out at 140. and I have a little bit more expo. I have about 25% expo on my DX7S. Tail holds really well on this one. It's just not as impressive. And again, I don't really know why. I think if you think about it in terms of power system, the only difference between this one and the other one is that this one has the Helimax speed controller. The other one has the speed controller that comes with the Wild Hobbies kit. Still has plenty of power though. If you guys want to practice stuff with it, you just got to manage the collective a little more. Alright guys, I'm going to talk to you now about a little bit about maintenance tips and tricks and some of the things that you can look for when you start flying these little MCPXs. One of the things to keep in mind is as you start flying and you start crashing, every time you crash, not every time, but a lot of the times, you're probably going to end up losing. These links are going to pop out, the pitch links, the ones that go from the blade grips to the swash plate. So always carry a few spares with you at all times, because a lot of times you're not even going to be able to find them. If you have one of these upgraded rotor, I guess hubs, main hubs, from either from RKH or from, I'm not so sure if the Micro Heli one has it, but I know this version of RKH has the actual hub itself captures the pitch links. So when you crash, you don't lose them. But then on the other side, on the other hand of it, if you pay attention, I mean, these links get bent over time. There's too much force being put on them. So I don't know if I like it that much. I'd rather just keep a few spares with me. Another thing is a lot of the times the main gear will pop out, so you just got to push it back in. That's all there is to it. And when you do the brushless conversion, this is something that I forgot to mention, but when you do it, make sure that you put a little bit of green Loctite on the motor shaft. Basically the motor shaft will come with the pinion already in it. Just remove the pinion, use a little bit of green Loctite and put the pinion back in. When I was testing it before we did the first flights, the pinion started to spin loose, so we had to actually remove the pinion, Loctite it, put it back in, and then it was fine. You know, sometimes you might want to look for little cracks in the boom and stuff if the tail performance is really sluggish and you have a hollow boom like this WOW. I believe this WOW Hobbies conversion comes with a hollow boom. You know, after a few crashes, the boom will start, just because it's hollow, it'll start, you know, cracking and stuff, and you know, you can feel it just by turning the tail itself. You know, if the tail is too loose, you might have a crack on your boom. So just check for that. If you have the solid carbon boom, the one that is solid that you bought, say you bought the piece of carbon rod like I explained earlier at a hobby shop, if you're using that type of boom, that boom is strong and it's just not going to crack. But you know, use your common sense. Look at your main shaft, make sure your main shaft doesn't have any cracks or anything like that. Now when it comes to the actual feel of the helicopter, I know a lot of people that are like basically what they're doing, and actually this one has it, I did it to give it a shot and see if it would work, is they use these, they take the little grommets that hold the canopy onto the actual helicopter and they put them on the swash plate on the balls, and then they connect the servo rods. Supposedly I guess that's supposed to dampen some of the vibrations that are induced by the servos, and also it's supposed to give it a little bit more a more positive feel because the ball link is not rotating. I really don't notice a difference with them, to be honest with you. I mean, it's just something else you can do if you want to. And then finally, I wanted to talk about vibrations. And you know, when I took off with the brushless the first time you saw on that flight, it was shaking very violently. There's a lot of reasons for the shake. One of the reasons could be a bent spindle shaft, which I know I don't have because it's a brand new helicopter. It's not been crashed yet. Another reason could be that the blades are you're running the blades too tight. And as you can see, these are actually pretty tight. I need to loosen them up. That could cause vibrations as well. Another reason why you could see vibrations is because the servo, you have a bat servo, for example. So if the servo is either defective or something, it'll shake, it'll vibrate. If not, it could also be that your servo is getting dirty, and over time that will happen. You can get one of these brand new out of the box flight and it's all fine, and then after you put 50 flights or whatever, 100 flights, you'll notice that it gets that shake. Sometimes that's caused by just dirt on the servos. So all you have to do is remove the servos like you saw me do before when we did the brushless conversion. Take a little Q-tip with just rubbing alcohol and just clean the connections real well, put the servo back in. 90% of the time that fixes the vibration. Other than that, that's really it for tips and tricks. I mean, there's a lot of things, of course, that you can do to these guys, but that pretty much covers all the basics. One thing I don't want to forget before we wrap this up and talking about brushless conversions is I get a lot of requests, a lot of questions about people saying, well, I'm trying to run this like brushless tail motor and all these brushless everything. You know, honestly, I know that there's brushless tail motors that work. I know there's people trying them and some people have had success. Personally, I have yet to have any success around even the people that hang with me. I know a guy personally, Scott, friend of mine, he's an addict with these things and he's made a dozen of them and he really knows what he's doing. He has not had any luck with brushless tail motors. By the time this video is released, maybe there's a brushless tail motor out there that works. As of right now, I know there's really nothing that is as, I guess you could say, plug and play as this 120SR tail motor, brush tail motor. So don't try to reinvent the wheel. If you just want an easy solution, just to, you know, like I said, plug and play, these are the items that work. Just get the regular 120SR tail motor and just put it in and just live with it. It's going to work really well. I know it adds a little bit more weight to the tail than you really actually need to have, but it's just a very simple way to improve tail performance and to actually make the tail work well in conjunction with a brushless main motor. And finally, you know, bottom line is, guys, you know, let's just keep it real. These things are MCPXs. They're little freaking tiny little helicopters. Just don't be anal. You know, if it has a little bit of a shake, or just fly it. You know, if it's flyable, fly it. Don't spend hours troubleshooting a little vibration or a little this or a little that. Just fly the crap out of it, enjoy it, and just use it as a tool to assist you in progressing with your flying. Hi guys, we're at Triple Creek Fun Fly and around the Tampa area, I guess. And I have my buddy Craig and Courtney. Craig's actually one of my best friends. He's the guy that started flying with me. He taught me basically how to fly. And Courtney flies with me practically almost every day back home. And both of them have MCPXs. And it's blowing probably about 15 miles an hour easily right now, at least 12 miles an hour. Craig has the same setup I have that I showed you guys just earlier on the video where we did the upgrade from Wild Hobbies. And Courtney has pretty much the same setup, but the motor she has is also an Outrunner, but it's an 11,000 kV motor. And I forgot to mention that there's two types. There's an 11,000 kV motor. There's a 13,600 kV motor. The one we did on mine was a 13,600. The one that Courtney has is an 11,000. The 11,000 is more supposed to be run with like a 10-tooth pinion, really, but she has a 9-tooth, so her head speed is a little bit lower, but it's still great. It has really good power, and it's more efficient, of course, so she gets more flight time. You get, what, like 4 minutes?
It's pretty close to 4.
And on the 13,600 motor that we did on my helicopter, same that Craig has, we installed a 9-tooth pinion, and as you saw, that thing had crazy power. Craig has run a 10-tooth pinion on it, and the power is just, what's the power like?
Ridiculous.
But the flight time is very, very short too.
Yeah, like minute 45.
Yeah, so there you go. I mean, a minute 45 to 2 minutes is just not enough. So I recommend the 9-tooth. So anyway, we're here to prove a point. These guys are going to fly these things in a 12 to 15 mile an hour wind, and yeah, we're just going to watch the show. Here we go. And I don't think you can probably hear Craig's on the audio because I have a special microphone that's eliminating all the wind noise, but his is cranked up like mine, and Courtney's is a little bit lower head speed. But right now it's blowing easily 15 miles an hour. And these guys are flying their MCPXs, no problem. I mean, they're fighting it. Are you having a hard time?
Yes, very much.
What's hard about, do a hurricane.
A hurricane? All right, hold on. Oh, God. Yeah.
Is it hard to fly in this much wind?
It's very hard. It's pitching all over the place and a lot of collective. It's it's a handful.
Isn't this like good practice though?
Oh, it's very good practice. And you get your orientations, of course, and you get to practice saving it.
Was that Craig? Craig almost ran into my cameraman Sean here. Oh. All right, guys, that's it for episode number 20 of SmackTalkRC.com. I hope that you learned a thing or two about the MCPX. There's a lot, of course, to do with these models. Then there's certainly a lot of fun. And, you know, I really didn't mean to put some of these upgrades down. you know, a lot of these really cool upgrades are just cool to have. So it's completely up to you. If you like the looks of it, if you like to have all the metal bling, just go for it. As you saw, I actually have one with all the metal stuff and the carbon fiber stuff. So, but nonetheless, you can get a basic MCPX to fly really, really well just with the brushless upgrade. So that's it for episode number 20, and it's also it for season number 2. So I'll see you guys next year, 2012, with season 3 of SmackTalk RC. See you later.
We need that, 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 we need that.
Drop it down.
Hey! Nice
Don't run enough up and down.
Closer, closer. Yeah. Oh shit, that was close. Try not to get in. I don't know if I got that or not. Rainbows, rainbows.
Mine is destroyed.
I heard that.
I hope it was useful. Of course, if you have any questions, hopefully you learned a thing or two about the MCPX and all the options you have available to you. That's it.
That's badass.
Take number 7. So this is it for episode number 20 of SmackTalkRC.com. I hope these tips were useful to you. God damn.
I can't finish it. It'd be so cool. Let's do it again. This will work.
All right, guys, that's it for episode number 20 of SmackTalk RC. I hope this episode was useful. I thought you learned a thing. You can't laugh behind Sean. We have to get this shit done. This will actually work really well. Take number 9. All right, here we go. Action. All right, guys, that's it for episode number 20 of SmackTalk RC. I hope that these... I don't think this can ever be fixed. I don't think this can ever be fixed. Hello? Hello? Look at the wires for the tail. I don't think that can ever be fixed. I don't think that's utterable.
You gonna fly? Come on, fly. That's very sad. Very sad.